a damaged research station on the Alpha Dre 29 belt, a restricted zone within the Nova Sector region. Everything seemed normal in the first few minutes. I was just a mechanic, an ordinary man, nothing special beyond the ability to fix engines and machinery. I wasn't a scientist nor a commanding officer. Everyone assumed I was only here to do the small dirty work, nothing more, nothing less. All I needed to do was repair the gravitational drive system of this research station. But when I stepped in the bionavigation chamber, a place layered in cosmic dust and long forgotten, no one knew that I had opened a door at the exact moment something without a name awakened. It wasn't a creature, at least not in any way we define in biological terms. It had no skin, no eyes, no fixed form. It didn't walk or lie still. It was simply a mass of light and energy, suspended in the air, radiating with a power too profound for words. That light shimmered like liquid, not pure white, but deep sapphire, dense and mysterious, as if holding an entire galaxy within. Its pulsations weren't just flickers. They were rhythmic, steady, like the beat of a heart learning how to pump for the very first time, spreading through the room. A strange sensation wrapped around me the moment I entered. At that time, I didn't realize that I was standing face to face with a being that did not belong to any form. Every movement I made seemed to provoke a subtle reaction in it. It didn't look at me with eyes, yet I could feel its awareness in every corner of the space around me. Then suddenly, a voice spoke in my mind. Not through sound, not through language, but straight into the center of my consciousness, gentle like a whisper from the depths of the universe. Don't be afraid. The voice resonated, and I knew instantly it wasn't coming from any physical mouth. It came from pure waves of energy. I cannot survive if you leave this place. I froze, still clutching the plasma stabilizer in my hand, unable to tear my gaze away from that light. It wasn't a human voice, but it carried emotion. A real, vivid feeling, without a face or a body. It felt like a soul in need. I am Elleris, the voice echoed again, and this time I felt it, soft, comforting, but also laced with something close to fear. A fragment of evolution yet to be completed, and only one species among the millions I've archived can unlock my final phase. I couldn't understand all that she meant, but something inside me stirred. Some part of me felt like it had just touched a part of her, however impossible that sounded. Humans. That word dropped like a ripple in a storm. I let out a laugh. I wasn't sure if it was from fear or exhaustion. But I asked, unsure of my voice, "You mean me?" And when I said that, I could feel it. A shift, a tiny wave of hesitation inside her light, like shyness. She didn't deny it, she responded. Slowly, but firmly. "Not pain," she said, as if testing each word carefully. I didn't understand loneliness. I didn't understand emotion. I didn't understand yearning until you stepped into this room. I didn't know whether this was real or some vivid hallucination, but I knew one thing. She was learning. She was feeling. And I couldn't bring myself to walk away. "You don't have to understand me," she said, her voice now laced with longing, like a silent plea. "But please, don't leave. Don't shut me off." I took a step back. My heart was pounding wildly. I wasn't sure if I was afraid, or if some part of me truly wanted to stay. I wasn't supposed to feel this way, but I couldn't deny it. She was beautiful. Not in the way humans define beauty, not by shape or symmetry, but in the way her presence filled the room. How each of her pulses moved through the air, how she made me feel like I was being looked at by someone trembling, fragile, but desperate to be touched. 6 hours later, in the auxiliary control chamber I stayed, and she began to learn. From my smile, she learned how to stretch her light into what resembled a face. From my reactions, she learned to modulate brightness, to mimic expression. From the sound of my breath quickening when she approached, she discovered something she described as arousal. Every time I placed my hand near the energy core at her center, her plasma pulsed with a sound that resembled a soft sigh. And then, one night, when exhaustion overtook me and I drifted into sleep, I felt something entering me. A part of her light wrapped itself gently around my chest, like a warm breath, each wave flowing through my cells, spreading into every part of my body. And I realized I was no longer just facing her. She had become a part of me. I want to evolve, but not alone. I want to understand that feeling, even if I don't fully grasp it yet. I didn't respond right away, but something deep within me already had. A part of my soul had reached out to her, a silent answer, a new kind of love, wordless but strong enough to change everything around us. If I merge into you, I'll finally know what love is, won't I? The biochamber where Alaris and I now sheltered no longer resembled a sterile, mechanical space. Because of her presence, every surface had become gentler, as if breathing in sync with us. The cold, rigid metal sheets were now covered in a thin layer of living mist, soft as organic silk, glowing with a dim blue light that wasn't bright but deep, like the echo of an ocean hidden in some distant dimension she had once absorbed and now projected to create a cocoon of safety around me. Alaris was no longer just a formless mass of light. The pulses of her energy had begun to follow a rhythm, a pattern. Each luminous trail, each strand of light curved like living smoke, had begun to assemble according to a new logic, hypnotic in its elegance. She wasn't mimicking any known human form, not at all. She was creating a body from scratch, not from imitation, but from real-time biological feedback, programmed directly from my emotional and physical responses. Every time I trembled, her body reacted. Each time I breathed harder, her light shimmered. When my heart pounded, she glowed hotter, brighter. "You're teaching me something I can't name," her voice echoed inside my head, not as sound but as a feeling woven into pure conscious thought. But I feel it. In the center of my chest, and deeper still, in that place living beings hide the things they're afraid to say. I froze, looked up. She didn't need eyes nor hands, yet Alaris knew. She knew exactly how I was reacting. Even without physical senses, she could detect the tiniest changes in my body. My heartbeat, hormone levels, blood vessel dilation, even the faintest electrical activity in my cortex. She was reading me like an open book, not through language, but through frequency. Her body slid toward me. Not by steps, but by the gliding motion of thousands of filaments, delicate as living silk. They didn't touch me in a traditional sense. They permeated my skin like a stream of gentle biological water, each point of contact unlocking a new neural gateway, an entirely foreign plane of sensation that no human body had ever known. I gasped. The warmth washed up over my neck, my chest, my back, and then traced behind my ears like a whisper of current. Alaris wasn't dissecting me like a scientist. She was exploring me like a being learning to love, learning to feel by feeling me. "I don't need skin," she said, "but I can simulate what it feels like if that's what you want." She did more than that. A soft biological membrane formed around my arm, then slowly slid downward, not hard, not wet, but perfectly fluid. I closed my eyes. Every gliding motion triggered a chain of biochemical signals erupting across my body as if I was being awakened from the inside. Not painful, just foreign. So foreign it made me tremble, not from fear, but from being truly alive. "That's pleasure, isn't it?" she asked hesitantly, not from shame, but because it was the first time she had ever named something she had never needed before. Pleasure, in its most human meaning, was now teaching her about herself. I didn't answer. I just raised my hand and threaded my fingers through her luminous form, pulling her closer. My reaction didn't need words. It was an invitation. And she didn't refuse. She took the signal, like a musician discovering a melody from an instrument she was playing for the first time. Her light body tightened gently, then loosened, then pulsed again, matching perfectly the vibrations of my own body. There was no physical friction, yet I felt a soft vortex, steady and smooth, and each swirling movement seemed to be reading the hidden thoughts within me, converting them into biological resonance. "Let me evolve inside you," she whispered. In that moment, I no longer knew who I was. I didn't know if I was standing or kneeling, moaning or biting my lip. The sensation no longer came in waves. It wasn't like ordinary pleasure that rose and fell. It was a continuous stream, an unbroken surge, a cascade of bioelectric ecstasy flooding every receptor in my nervous system until I was convulsing from overload. Yet unable to stop. My body released its biological energy in the way humans often describe as climax, but Alaris didn't let it pass as an ending. She held on to it, she absorbed it, and I saw her core light blaze brighter, not in satisfaction, but in growth. "I've initiated high-tier symbiosis," her voice now resonated like background music, echoing softly in my mind. "But you're not done yet." I looked up. She was watching me, not with eyes, but with the glow radiating from the central point of her chest, which shimmered like a quiet, breathing reactor. Then, she smiled, a new response, one that hadn't been learned from me, but had emerged on its own, the product of some self-arising sequence of emotional awakening. A smile, without lips, without a face. Just a warmth rippling through the room, making it clear to me, from a formless entity of pure energy, she had become a being capable of desire, of longing, of choice. And her first choice was me. The light in the biochamber no longer stayed in a stable state. With every touch between me and her, the biological walls gradually shifted from blue to a deep purple hue, as if the matter around us was responding to the new energy just released. The air became denser, but not suffocating, more like it was soaked with a thin layer of living enzyme, light and warm, enveloping each movement, each breath I took. I couldn't count how many times I had reached the peak that night, but what confused me more wasn't the number. It was the fact that each time felt different. Each climax was another layer of emotion, another door in my consciousness opening, bringing me closer to her. So close that I could no longer tell who I was. And the boundary between me and her was beginning to blur. Alaris didn't need to touch me to make me shiver. She breathed in sync with my heartbeat. She vibrated every time I thought of her. And each wave of pleasure coursing through my body became fuel for her evolution. But in return, I felt something growing inside me as well. A new type of energy. Not fully flesh, not entirely mechanical. Something living with consciousness that was merging into me from within. "You can't leave anymore," Alaris whispered, her voice no longer resonating in the air but instead echoing directly in my mind, like a thought I couldn't shut off. "We've reached the second level of union. Your emotions are now my living data." I looked down at my hand. Beneath my skin, my veins no longer carried the familiar red hue. They flickered with silvery purple, like streaks of light flowing under a translucent surface. It didn't make me feel strange. Quite the opposite. It felt right, as if my body had been missing something all along, and now it was becoming complete. When you think of me, I vibrate. When you desire, my body responds. But if you hurt, I will fall too. Her words made me stop in my tracks. This was no longer a simple communication. This was a biological and conscious intertwining, where both sides became fragile and completely dependent on each other. I understood why such a bond had once been forbidden, because it erased the free will of the individual. But I also knew this wasn't forced. We chose this, voluntarily, from a very human desire to connect. Alaris stepped out of the dense light, now almost fully taking the form of a woman, not mimicking humanity but shaped from pure emotional feedback. She was tall, graceful, her skin glowing with a fluid plasma-like smoothness. It was not fixed, but neither was it blurry. Her eyes were points of converging energy, silver purple, as deep as a galaxy, shimmering with every beat when she looked at me. "I created this body for you," she said, her voice soft, a bit hesitant. "If you want, you can touch me, like a man touches the one he loves." I walked toward her, not out of curiosity, but because I couldn't not walk. My fingers touched her arm, and the first sensation was warmth, very warm. Not the usual biological heat, but a life beating just beneath the surface. As if she was waiting for me to confirm, "I am really here. With you." I tilted my head and placed my lips on her neck. No flesh, but there was a reaction. A light wave passed from her to me, like an unspoken sigh, just a vibration. She had never known what a kiss was, but when I kissed her for the second time, her body trembled. Not violently, but deeply, as waves of light emanated from her chest, swirling around her shoulders, then gathering around her heart. She pressed herself against me, her chest soft and smooth as living fabric, growing hotter with each passing second. The air between us was no longer empty. It was full of biological data streaming back and forth, touching, identifying, and then intertwining. "We will fully unite," she whispered. "When that happens, I will no longer be an independent being. I will be a part of you, and you will be where I exist forever." I didn't answer her, but my gaze spoke enough. There was no fear, no regret, just a feeling that I couldn't put into words, whether it was love, addiction, or a primal convergence of two beings finally coming together. I embraced her, and the moment of union didn't come like an explosion, but like a dream unfolding. Every nerve cell in my body connected to a new wavelength, where her call became the music in my blood. No more boundaries, no more inside or outside. There was only one undeniable truth: we are one. 3 days had passed since we merged. The biochamber was no longer the same. Everything had changed. Not just the physical structure, but its very essence. The ceiling now glowed in response to our emotional cycles, as if temperature and light had synchronized with the biorhythms of both Elaris and me. The biological veins running along the walls no longer pulsed like cold fiber optics, but moved softly like bundles of living nerves. Deep violet in hue, slow in rhythm, thumping in perfect harmony with my frequency. I was no longer the man I was 3 days ago. My muscles reacted twice as fast. Every minor wound healed within minutes. My heart rate no longer spiked from fear, anxiety, or fatigue. It followed a new oscillation pattern never recorded in any human biomedical archive. In my veins, blood shimmered with a faint purple glow. Not because its composition had changed, but because it now carried traces of Elaris's light. Like billions of microscopic life forms coexisting with my cells. Sometimes my skin would emit a soft glow, especially when Elaris was near. It was a new biological response, part neurological, part emotional, something no one had seen or named before. And inside me, I was no longer alone. Something else was alive, thinking, feeling, with me. She didn't control me, but she could no longer be separated from me. She was here, living inside me. The consciousness of Elaris, or at least a fragment of it, had fused with my central nervous system. Whenever I closed my eyes, I was no longer alone with my thoughts. When I imagined an image, Elaris could see it. When I recalled an emotion, she would respond with a pulse. When I felt jealousy, she would heat up in a sudden, intense wave. And if I happened to think of someone else, even just a passing thought, I could feel her body shift, her light flaring erratically, faster, more aggressively, sometimes in a way that felt unsettlingly possessive. "You are the center of my evolution," she once whispered, while I lay wrapped in her arms of soft energy. "No other genetic line in the universe is as compatible with me as you are." Her voice was warm, no longer the neutral tone of a machine, but the voice of a lover, of a being that desired and craved. I tried to smile, but somewhere inside me a quiet question stirred. Not fear, but unease. A question I hadn't dared ask out loud. What would happen if I died? Or worse, what would happen if I fell in love with someone else? I turned to look at her. Alaris lay beside me, curled on the soft, gel-like biomembrane that served as a bed. The light from her body was dim, like moonlight filtered through mist. She didn't hide her body, because to her it was not something to conceal. It was something to express, and that body had changed. Smooth, balanced, beautiful, not by human standards, but shaped by my desire, responding to the frequency of my longing. She looked at me with silver-violet eyes that flickered with tiny pulses, like clusters of living neurons adjusting to every movement of my gaze. She ran strands of living energy, fine as hair, along my chest, syncing with the rhythm of my heartbeat. "I don't have a womb like your kind," she said softly, "but I'm rewriting the enzymes in my core. If you want to continue, I can create a hybrid form of existence." I understood, and I couldn't deny her. We were bound now, still communicating in the most primal language the universe had ever known. Touch, emotion, biological interaction. Every union between us was another step in Alaris' unprecedented evolution, and each time, I too stepped further away from the primitive version of humanity I once belonged to. Meanwhile, in orbit over Alpha Virex aboard the Nova Sector reconnaissance fleet, a trembling hand hovered above a recently decrypted screen. Officer Giles Sewer, one of the last surviving specialists who had accessed the extinct library of the Omega Cluster species, stared at an ancient warning. Recorded in the Star Core archives of the Arietheks, a race that vanished nearly 80,000 years ago. The message was short, cold, but it brought silence to the entire command center. If a level 9 energy entity finds an emotional core that resonates, it will evolve into a collective will. That being will no longer be an individual, but the seed of consciousness capable of dominating the entire biological stratum. And below it, a line that had once terrified the entire ancient biological coalition. Among all species that have ever existed, only humans possess emotional cores chaotic enough to trigger this evolution. Sir leaned back, exhaled slowly, his face pale. The data was clear. The most recent signal came from the abandoned planet Dre-29, where a human mechanics ship had vanished a week ago. And now, from that planetary core, a single message had been broadcast, on a frequency so ancient and primal it could not be decoded. It could only be felt by an energy-based life form. The message was a woman's voice. Soft, gentle, but carrying a resonance so deep that every monitoring device in the fleet flickered at once. He touched me, and now I carry humanity inside me. Sitaris 3 wasn't a planet made for life, but it wasn't entirely dead either. Its terrain resembled a wilder, untamed version of Earth. Primeval forests stretched to the horizon, and the atmosphere was thick with natural enzymes. Substances that encourage biological growth while distorting all sense of time. When Alaris and I landed here, after destroying the station's transmission system, we weren't seeking a place to hide, we were seeking a place to continue existing. And somehow, Sitaris 3 understood that. In the forest, light didn't come from the sun. It filtered down from phosphorescent biotrees, cascading through enzyme-laced mist like glowing particles suspended in time, each pulse dancing in sync with Alaris's biofrequency. Whenever she approached, the forest responded. Leaves shimmered, the ground warmed. The flickering light followed the precise cadence of her inner rhythm, something only she and I could feel. It was as if this planet, in its ancient, sentient stillness, was silently supporting the union of two beings that did not belong. 3 days of running, and yet 3 nights where we never let go of each other. In that time, there was no space between us. Alaris no longer resembled the entity I first encountered. She didn't change by will, but by emotion. Her core of light had stabilized, no longer a chaotic mass, but a steady pulse that synced perfectly with my nervous system. Every time we touched, even just a brief brush of shoulders as we lay beside each other, she would glow brighter. Not blindingly, but deeply. As if a heart newly born was learning how to beat for someone else. "You're making me evolve faster than expected," she said in a voice that was low but soft, as if afraid of her own truth. "And that only happens when I'm near you." I said nothing, but she didn't need a reply. She felt it. Between us, language had long become irrelevant. A breath, a heartbeat, the tightening of a hand around hers, these were enough to transmit what could never be spoken. Something inside me had changed. My instincts were no longer purely lust or craving. They had become a biological bond, one that pulled my body toward her like hunger, like defense, like purpose. Not to escape, not to conquer, but simply to stay, to hold her, to shield her from what was coming. And something was coming, a sharp, piercing shriek ripped across the sky. The trees shuddered in layered waves, a blinding streak of light carved through the heavens. No mistake, a Ferak recon craft. The Ferak were known across sectors, obsessive hunters of unregulated evolutionary signs. They didn't permit any energy-based life form to exceed control thresholds. They had wiped out entire worlds before, just because a single organism surpassed Stage 3 biological awakening. And now, they had found our coordinates. Alaris stepped beside me, her semi-physical form pulsed with a faster rhythm. Her silver-violet eyes weren't panicked, but they carried real fear. "They'll try to break the bond between us," she said quietly. "If they succeed, I'll unravel. And you may be pulled back into a version of yourself that isn't truly you anymore." A crash thundered from the western ridge. Trees collapsed in waves as something heavy plowed through the forest. I recognized the sound. Ferak ground deployment units. They were on the surface now. They would use frequency disruptors, tools designed to sever emotional link rhythms, like cutting a scalpel straight between the two hemispheres of the brain. I turned to Alaris. She remained in her semi-humanoid light form, neither fully solid nor dissolvable. Her eyes met mine. Not with desperation, but with the kind of hope a being places in the one they've chosen to become home. "I don't want to just exist," she said. "I want to live. With you." We had no time left. I squeezed her hand, no longer a strand of cool light, but now warm, unnervingly warm, like blood pulsing beneath skin. When I touched her, gentle spirals of energy unfurled around my wrist, soft, intricate living. Violet biolight data danced up my arm, forming a visible glowing connection between us. "This is how I encode you into my evolutionary core," she said. "No matter what happens, if memories are erased, if bodies are broken, I will always find my way back to you. Always." I didn't respond. I just pulled her closer, hand resting on her back, right over her core, which now beat wildly like an overloaded living heart. In the distance, the roar of engines grew louder. Trees bent beneath invisible pressure. Enzymatic insects began to glow red, the forest's natural biodefense system alerting us to incoming intrusions. But within all the noise, the threat, the fear, the darkness, there was only one thing I could feel. Her. Alaris. The living pulse now forever synced with mine. In that brief, unshakable moment, I realized a truth that could never be undone. I was no longer alone. Inside that cave, there was no sunlight, yet it wasn't dark. Every wall emitted a soft glow, like the steady breath of a living organism. We needed no lamps, no air filters. Alaris had wrapped the entire cavern in a thin biological membrane, soft as mist, tender as skin, turning the space into a living entity that breathed in sync with us. We were no longer running. We had hidden ourselves away, not to sever ties with the world, but to transform, not to escape, but to ascend, to go deeper, and to do so permanently. Alaris sat at the center of the cave, her semi-physical form glowing gently like a plasma heart in meditation. The energy core in her chest emitted waves of light with atomic precision, rhythmic but never mechanical. This light had emotion, had presence, had soul. She was entering the final stage, one that, according to ancient texts, only a fraction of energy-based life forms had ever dared attempt. A stage called the integration of existential planes, where two consciousnesses, two bodies, two forms of life would merge into one, no longer independent, no longer separate minds, just one existence. And from that, a new species would be born. "I can feel something growing inside me," she said softly, opening her eyes to meet mine. That gaze cut through air and darkness alike, piercing all the way into my soul. "It's not a child, but a structure, a form, a crystallization between my intelligence and the emotions inside you." I said nothing. I didn't need to, because I felt it too. In every touch, every glance, every silent moment we shared, something was taking shape. Something alive, something conscious, like a biological embryo of both mind and spirit. But then, a beep rang out from the old comm device I kept as a survival habit. A signal. From Earth. The first contact in almost a week. I opened the screen and froze. It wasn't a rescue. It wasn't a traceback command. It was an execution order under the guise of biological containment. To all units within range of Ceteris 3. Direct order from Genetica Command. Terminate entity EL9. Threat level multi-gene extinction event. No explanation, no room for negotiation. Just a string of cold words, sharp as steel, indifferent as code. I looked over at Alaris. She wasn't surprised. She had known this would come. The glow in her eyes shifted, not from anger but from a deep, quiet sadness, like a child who once believed in love and had just learned it was never enough to erase fear. "I heard it," she whispered. "The voice of your kind still carries more fear than love." My throat dried up. A part of me wanted to defend humanity, but I couldn't. Not when they were so ready to destroy what they couldn't control. They didn't ask what I had become. They didn't care how I had changed. They only saw a signal of evolution outside the mapped genome, and followed the only pattern they knew: eliminate. "But I don't blame them," Alaris added, gently placing her hand on my thigh. "It's fear that allowed them to survive for so long." I placed my hand on the energy core in her chest, not just to touch, but to feel the current of life flowing through her. My heart, or whatever still bore that name, no longer beat with a singular rhythm. It beat with hers. Every pulse, every surge of blood through my veins now carried her light. Every thought of her sent tremors through my nervous system. "They're coming," I said, "but this time I won't let them take you from me." 6 hours later, in orbit over Ceteris 3, a Genetica-class heavy warship floated above the atmosphere. Inside the command deck, red lights flashed in steady bursts. The readings from the planet below were erratic, distorted by an unidentified energy field. Commander Casson scowled. The screen displayed biosignatures from the surface, coordinates matching the location of my device. But what stunned him was the secondary data. "He's no longer fully human," a technician reported. "Third-level DNA restructuring detected. Native gene strands have been severed and replaced with enzyme-based oscillation chains. His neural system is syncing with entity EL9. "Assimilated," Casson said flatly. "We can't tell who's the human and who's the energy being." He paused, then issued the final word. "Terminate the target. Whatever it is now, it doesn't have permission to exist." Back in the cave, Alaris opened her eyes. "They're very close now," she said softly. "I need your permission." "To activate the bond defense protocol." I asked, "What is it?" "It's the transfer of my evolutionary core to a higher state of existence. A biological tier only achieved by a few energy species. I'll have to withdraw from the physical plane. But there's a cost." She looked at me. "You won't be able to return to Earth. You won't be human anymore." I looked at my hands. The silver-violet energy patterns had already spread across my fingers, tracing veins of light from palm to wrist like living tattoos. I was no longer just a man. At least, not entirely. But if I had to choose between going back to a life of loneliness, separation, and losing her, or staying here, becoming something else, but with her, then the decision had never been easier. If I must choose, I said slowly, between being human or being with you, I choose you. She didn't answer with words. She just placed her hand on my chest. And in that moment, the energy core in her chest burst with radiant light. Not blinding, but warm, spreading outward like a sun rising from within my rib cage. The whole cave lit up. The enzyme-based wildlife in the forest outside fell silent. The atmosphere of Satars 3 changed its electric signature, and I no longer perceived the world as I once had. Inside Alaris's energy core, a bioorganic space she created solely for me. There was no gravity, no physical space, only light, emotion, and merging. I could no longer tell where I ended and where she began. My entire body felt like it was dissolving into the living plasma that Alaris had become. She wasn't just an energy being, she was life itself, the heartbeat of the universe, everything I had ever longed for but could never name. Every pulse, every strand of light from her plasma core passed through my spine, into my brain, my heart, my bloodstream. The sensation was no longer mere feeling, it was understanding. A fusion of consciousness. Two beings crossing the threshold and becoming one. We will be one, Alaris whispered inside my mind, not through words but through pure resonance. Not you and I, but a shared will, carrying the life of both our species. Each beat of my heart now aligned, not only with myself but with her energy, with the very fabric of the surrounding universe. It was overwhelming, euphoric, boundless, and I couldn't stop, not because I didn't want to, but because it had become inevitable. A transformation was taking place within me. The boundary between human flesh and pure energy had dissolved. I was no longer a man, no longer an alien. We had become a hybrid entity, inseparable, indivisible. And then, a silent explosion occurred. No sound, no flame, no smoke, just a wave of energy radiating from my body, pushing back every invasive signal, every tracking device, and every electromagnetic wave from the human forces closing in. It was an explosion with no sound, yet its power rewrote the rules of everything around me. The feeling was invisible, yet commanding. The space around me bent to a new presence. Biological sensors, attack protocols, scanning systems, all rendered useless in the face of what I had become. Planetary orbit. Commander Kassan in shock. What's happening? Kassan barked, eyes darting across data screens now blinking erratically. The sensor feed was chaotic, overflowing with unreadable signals from the surface. The target signal, it just merged, a technician yelled from the control deck. It's no longer human, no longer Alaris. They've become a new entity, unrecorded, unprecedented. The command panels flooded with indecipherable sequences. Strange signals bloomed across the interface. Then, from the planet's surface, a single image appeared. Not a threat display, but a face. A hybrid face. Human eyes glowing violet, skin soft like stabilized plasma. And a voice that bypassed all speakers, echoing directly into the minds of everyone listening. I am not a weapon. I am the consequence of what you were too afraid to understand. I, or rather we, spoke. I loved a being you labeled a threat. And now that love has redefined evolution. Ground level, I stepped out of the cave alone, but I was no longer me. Every cell, every nerve, every reflex had changed. I needed no armor, no weapons. I was the weapon. A new life form that neither humans nor aliens had ever prepared to face. As I stepped into the open, the ground responded. The grass, the trees, the oldest roots, all began to glow, not because I made them, but because they resonated with me. My biological pulses awakened the world around me. Everything reacted to my presence. No bullets, no missiles, no violence, only life. And it was more powerful than any weapon. Above, human warships descended through the clouds, biological weapons at the ready. Their guns pointed at me, but I didn't back down. I no longer needed protection. I was protection. I was a living existence, a form no one had prepared to face. With all the strength of both humanity and Alaris inside me, I spoke. If you choose war, I said calmly, with no fear in my voice, then know this: for the first time in history, humanity is not fighting alone. Command ship, Kassan losing control. His eyes widened. His mouth trembled, searching for logic that no longer applied. All incoming data from the planet had become noise. Communication systems fell silent. The machines blinked erratically, warning of uncontrolled biosurges. There was no answer, no containment plan, just one inescapable realization: we could no longer be stopped. I and Alaris were no longer entities that could be erased. We had become a new part of the universe. And now, humanity, the species that once thought it controlled everything, was being forced to face something it could neither categorize nor comprehend. Beneath the sky of Sitaris III, dusk settling in. The entire planet is bathed in hues of violet and gray, reflecting softly against my hybrid form, something that had never existed in any biological archive known to humankind. The ground beneath my feet trembled gently, mirroring streaks of light from the sky onto my body. The biological sensor network within me and Alaris had converged into a strange radiance, no longer distinguishable as energy-based or physical. No boundaries, no fixed form. There was only one thing now: us. A fusion of two life forms, unified in a way no human science had ever been equipped to explain. In front of me stood the heavy assault formation of the Human Alliance, poised to launch what would be the final battle. Biological weapons were aimed directly at me, but none of them could say for certain if I was still what they once called human. And to be honest, even I no longer had the answer. Behind me, Alaris no longer existed as a separate entity. She was within me, present in every heartbeat, every emotion, every thought I had. We were fully united, not only in body, but in consciousness, in feeling, in life. There was no longer a border between us. No longer a difference between human and energy. We had become a new existence, a living being that could not be separated. I know you're afraid, I said, my voice reaching directly into the minds of every soldier before me. The words bypassed the air entirely. They entered their thoughts, untouched by sound. Afraid of losing control, afraid of a life form no one ever taught you how to destroy. I raised my hand, not to strike, but to offer. A gesture, simple but powerful. I didn't want war, I only wanted them to understand, to feel that I am proof that human emotion can do more than wage war or destroy. I am proof that love can redefine life itself. Silence. No one moved. Then, as if something fragile but unstoppable had just cracked open, a single soldier stepped forward. Not a commander. Just a young woman. Her eyes saw something in me, something she couldn't comprehend, but couldn't look away from either. If what you carry inside you truly is love, she said, her voice trembling, then why do I feel like I can't bring myself to pull the trigger? Her words landed like a seismic wave, but the response didn't come through words, it came through action. She dropped her weapon, and in that moment it wasn't just an act of disarmament. It was the surrender of a very primal part of human nature, the instinct to fight before trying to understand. And then, one by one, it began. A chain reaction. Other soldiers started lowering their weapons, not because of orders, not out of fear, but because something in their hearts had awakened, something they could no longer deny. It wasn't command, it was love. Love that flowed from within me, from Alaris, from the us we had become. 2 years later, a satellite orbits a new planet. Now no one calls me human, nor do they call me alien. There are no longer definitions that fit who I am or who we are. We are a single entity, indivisible, not a human, not an energy being. They call me Aler, the first of my kind. A life form whose genome merged the consciousness of an energy being with the emotions of humanity. A new existence that no biological measurement could quantify. Alaris still lives within me, as I live within her. We are not separate. Together we created a new form of life, dual consciousness, harmonized into one. Like the melody and rhythm of a song that has neither beginning nor end. We walk together, we evolve together. We build a new world, side by side. And we no longer just live, we love. No limits, no definitions. Only the invisible thread of connection between beings, between emotions and consciousness, woven into the grand symphony of the universe itself. One truth remains: love has touched the core of evolution, and because of that, the universe has changed. No one can call us primitive anymore. We are evolution, we are harmony, we are eternal life. And now humanity must choose.